Hanging in there. before. And with that, I would like to ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Long is absent. Counselor McLaughlin,
Present.
Counselor Runyon, absent. Counselor Randall,
Present.
Counselor Richardson,
Present.
Mayor Mays.
Present. Item 3 is Pledge of Allegiance. Will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is approval of the agenda. I understand we have a supplemental agenda. And okay. This will be item 10B. Where do we have it?
Actually,
Okay, this will be 11B. Under action items, it's a resolution declaring a state of emergency and restricting fireworks. So that will be, again, item 11B on your agenda. And so I would like to get a motion to approve our agenda as amended.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as amended. I'll second.
It's been moved by Counselor Randall and seconded by Counselor Richardson to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5A is a presentation from Mid-Columbia Community Action. I believe Mr. Kenny Lapointe is with us. Kenny, you want to come forward and give us your presentation?
Working?
Should be.
Good evening, Mayor Mays, members of the council. For the record, my name is Kenny Lapointe, Executive Director of Mid-Columbia Community Action Council. That's weird to see myself. Thank you for having me this evening. I wanted to just give you, I didn't provide a written presentation. I just wanted to give you a verbal because we've been busy. First of all, we had the Gloria Center grand opening on May 31st, just a couple weeks ago. I know some of you were able to attend that. Super exciting to get that project up and going. It was about 3 years, a little over 3 years of work on Mid-Columbia Community Action's part to get this facility completed. For those of you who do not know, the Gloria Center is a multi-agency social service center. It houses MCAC as well as Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, as well as Bridges to Health, the Columbia Gorge Health Council, One Community Health, Department of Human Services, Mid-Columbia Center for Living, the Oregon Human Development Corporation, and Enchiwana Housing. So it's a multicultural service center as well. So Enchiwana Housing provides services to the Native community, and the Oregon Human Development Corporation provides services to the Latinx community and the agricultural gorge. Additionally, the site holds a 36-bed non-congregate. So you all probably recall the pallet shelters. They have moved to this site where they're now located on the back half of the site. Those pallet shelters are going to serve as severe weather emergency shelter when we have heat events, when we have cold events, when we have wildfire smoke events. The site will be operationalized for that purpose. We were previously going to operate that site as a year-round shelter, but after the acquisition of the annex, which I'll give you an update on, we decided to move all our year-round shelter operations to that facility. The infrastructure is just much more suited to year-round shelter operations. Those pallet shelters are not meant for folks to live in all year round. They're really good in emergency situations, but they are not meant for 24/7 living. So that site is up and going now. All of our partner agencies are going to be moved in by the end of this month. So we're excited to have them coming into the facility. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we appreciate the city's partnership, both from a funding standpoint on that project. As you may recall, the city contributed some funding to that project early on, when we hardly had any funding for the project, I believe. So the city committed some funding for the project, and the city played the lead applicant and supported application for the community resiliency program that was offered by the Oregon Department of Energy, which is a solar resiliency program. So the Gloria Center has a full solar array and battery backup system on the facility, as well as electric vehicle charging stations that are open to the general public. So folks can come in to the front office and grab a card and go out and charge their electric vehicles out there. The facility will serve as a resiliency center. I'm told by our electricians that once those batteries are charged, which they are, and they're constantly charging every day, we could operate that site if the sun didn't shine for a month. So folks in the community could come into the Gloria Center and utilize that in the event that, you know, the power grid goes down or something along those lines. So we're very excited to have that. We're also producing more energy from a solar standpoint than we're using, which is really nice. And we're able to pass down that savings and operations cost to all the partners in the project. Before I move on, are there any questions about the Gloria Center?
Any questions about the Gloria Center?
If you haven't been out, please come by. It's a beautiful facility. We're very proud of it. We're proud of the infrastructure that we put in place. When I first came on, one of our strategic plan elements was to build better infrastructure for our agency. So we've moved from our offices over here on 4th Street. We actually put that property up for sale and it's in escrow right now. But we only had 8 staff when I started at that time. And today, during the middle of winter sheltering season, we have 40 staff. Not during winter season, we have about 30 staff. So a lot more staff. They don't fit in that small house over here. So we're very grateful to have that infrastructure, and we're grateful to provide this easier access facility where folks can come in and receive an array of services from multiple agencies rather than driving all throughout the gorge to try and access services from all these agencies. Many of those agencies are located, some of them have been located in Hood River, some have multiple offices. Some didn't have adequate infrastructure here. So we're excited that they all get to share in this with us.
Are you going to talk about the annex next?
I will.
Well, before you get to that, I just wanted to comment that I'm glad you recognized the city's participation. We did give, I believe it was $500,000, right? And I was there on May 31st, and I think it was the second or third time I've toured the facility. I was just wondering if you guys ever decide to bail out of there and go back to 4th Street, if you could entertain the notion of a new city hall on 7th Street.
Well, you could have 4th Street if you'd like.
Well, we have
Got a
one-
great ice cream shop next door,
well, you
which
could-
is the one thing we miss.
You
Is
would
Shannon's ice
mention that too. Okay. Any other questions about the Gloria Center or comments?
Yeah, any backlash from the local neighbors?
I haven't heard anything. It's the nicest building in the neighborhood. So
Well, that's good.
I'm proud that it is. And I think we've kind of eliminated all the naysayers, because now that the project's done and they're seeing it in operation, it's not what they thought it would be based on. No, it's a lot of fear. I understand.
And I think that applies to the annex as well.
Yes, definitely applies to the annex, which that was a long road. It was a quick road actually, but it was long. A lot of, community pushback. It was actually a really tough, I would say, year and a half for me personally, during the development of that project, but we're really proud of what we've been able to do to the entry to downtown there. So the annex renovations are completed. We opened in October. Today, in just a little context, there's 2 sides of the annex. So, right when you come into downtown, you see that first building, which is a separate building from the other side as you make the turn there. So having 2 different sides allowed us to establish a family shelter and a singles and couples shelter. The family shelter is the new thing for us, because there hasn't been a family shelter facility on the Oregon side of the gorge at all. So we're very excited that we were able to put that in. We've been using hotel vouchers to put families up who were unsheltered. So it's very nice to have that facility. And then you have this separate side with the singles and couples side. We have food that's available there for folks. We have on-site services from multiple service partners, many of who are joining us at the Gloria Center. We have a pantry room. We have 3 laundry rooms on the site that were sort of sponsored by the Roundhouse Foundation. We did a lot of renovation on that facility, close to $2 million in renovation. And I think that it's possible that the roof on that building would have caved in this last winter time. Had we not, that was the first thing we tackled in February of last year when we acquired it, is we replaced the roof. So we did a lot of work. We did new stucco, new paint, new windows, new ETAC units in all the rooms, trying to create an energy efficient building as much as we could. So a lot of upgrades, a lot of things to sort of mitigate damages that would be created inside a unit. So we got rid of all the carpeting. We have hard surface flooring, painted all the rooms. And operation is going very well there. From a staffing standpoint, it's been easier for us to hire staff because we have better facilities, better than an RV, which is where our staff were housed 24/7 previously in the pallet shelter site. So it's nice to have an adequate facility for staff. We today are serving about 65 people at the annex. We've had up to 75 during winter storm surge capacity. So this last winter, when we had severe weather, we operationalized some additional beds at the annex because we didn't have the Gloria Center yet. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to get folks in who were in danger of the elements, but who normally would not come into the annex because they were unable to comply with our community expectations if they were to stay year round. So they could do it for, a week. But when it came down to doing it for, 6 months at a time, we're unable to do that. So we kind of opened it up for that. When folks come into the annex, our goal is to get them into permanent housing. I'm not really that interested in running a shelter for the rest of my life. I'm interested in getting people out of the need for shelter and getting them into permanent housing. Since we opened the annex in October, we've placed 24 people into permanent housing. So we've had a lot of success from that standpoint, and we'll continue to push that. On average, the last 3 years, we've placed over 100 individuals into permanent housing each year. So making good progress on that.
Just in the Dalles or?
That is, so about 125 people in our service territory last year. So that's Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman County.
Thank you.
With the majority being in Wasco County because cost of rental housing is much more affordable than it is. Hood River's got like the highest rental prices in the state.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a quick question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a relatively recent pamphlet about Project Turnkey 2.0 projects in general that I think the annex was highlighted in. And do you have a
Yes.
sense how other Project 2.0, Turnkey 2.0 projects are going on around the state?
I know generally they've gone fairly well. There's been, pushback from other communities. We were the cover of that legislative highlights from Project Turnkey 2.0. I think there was 13 or something like that Project Turnkeys. I want to say there's over 30 statewide
I
since.
thought there was 19 in the first and 11 in the second.
Yeah, something you probably know better.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like 30-ish total statewide, but we were highlighted a lot in that legislative brochure. And then I was one of the keynote speakers at the Oregon Community Foundation lunch about a month ago. And that was highlighting the success that we've had at the annex. And I've had folks from all over the state asking to come here, and we've given them tours of our facilities because we've had a lot of good success in what we're doing. The other thing I want to say that's a huge deal is we've had as many as 30 children under the age of 18 living on that west building of the annex. I think we have about 25 today, but I know the community notices when they drive by and they see children playing with their parents in that parking lot there, or on a fake lawn we put out there where the pool used to be. But that's definitely a game changer, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of that that next generation and that they're not falling back into homelessness, generational poverty, and that's really. We've also got a partnership with the Youth Empowerment Shelter, the Yes House. So they serve youth. They have youth who age out of their, I call them youth, but they're like 20. As they age out of their program, they may not be ready for permanent housing at that point, but the Yes House has to exit them from their program due to their restrictions and funding. And we've set priority for clients coming out of the Yes House who aren't ready to go into permanent housing, and they can come to the annex and get a room there. And that provides some more stability longer term for them. And also it eliminates that sort of risk of them falling into homelessness at such a young age, which we certainly don't want to have happen. I think there's only really one thing left at the annex that we need to finish from a renovation standpoint, and that's that deck up top. We didn't quite get that done by the end of last year, and the weather was not permitting us to keep doing that. So it's getting wrapped up in the next couple of weeks here. Are there any other questions on annex?
I have a quick one. Are the youth that are coming out of the ES, are they getting counseling through your agency?
Yeah, they get housing counseling from our agency. They'll get paired up with other services that they might qualify for, whether it's from a culturally specific service provider or behavioral health provider. They'll get paired up with them, and the Yes House still is able to come out and provide them services as well, sort of transition. Again, our goal is to get those youth prepared for placement into permanent housing, whatever that might mean for them. Sometimes it's shared living situation, but whatever it might mean.
Anybody else? Councilor Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a comment of thanks, Kenny, to your staff and you. The annex in particular is just a real asset to sort of the least among us in our community. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
And I drove by and saw the children playing in the lot, and that gives you, it gives a good impression.
Definitely. I mean, it's hard to not see that happening and feel good about what's going on.
I agree.
I'm proud that we're able to house children. I'm proud that we're able to house singles and couples. Everybody who's there seems to be very grateful to be there. They're doing the work to get themselves into permanent housing. So we're happy to do that. It's the right thing to do.
Speaking of Project Turnkey, the annex was funded with 2.0, right? The second round.
Yes.
Has there been a third round? I haven't heard anything.
No, there has not been a third round. I would imagine that this next legislative session, there's going to be a push to fund another round of Project Turnkey. So just a reminder, the legislature funded Project Turnkey, gave the money to the Oregon Community Foundation, and they then administered the dollars. It was really a great way to administer it. I mean, I'm not the one, I guess I'm on record, but I'm not the one to say it, that it's not always easy going through a state agency. So it's nice to have a foundation who's straying the dollars.
Yeah, that was on the record.
Oops.
Something I happen to agree with. Okay. Anybody else? I would like to point out Councilor Long has joined us several minutes ago. She's here. Anybody else?
No.
Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate
I
it.
wanted to give one other update on
Sure.
a couple other, actually, I have two other things. The point in time count is going to be released here pretty soon. Again, that's a one count of homeless individuals over, it's basically one night. But it does occur over a few days during a week. But the main push is over one night. It was the fourth week in January of this year. It takes a while to compile these numbers. That's not on us. We get the numbers together and then we send them to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So take it up a level from the state, and then you got a federal government who's overseeing something, and it takes probably like 9-10 months for them to verify the numbers. We will release unverified numbers here pretty soon, but I'll just a little glimpse into what we're going to release. The numbers in our service territory over the last 3 years have pretty much stayed flat. So we have not seen an increase in homelessness in Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman County areas. In fact, in Wasco County last year, we had a 17% decrease in homelessness, or in Wasco County alone. So it's great that we're able to stabilize. I don't think a lot of other areas in the state have been able to stabilize. But that will be coming soon. I wanted to give an update on the Chenoweth Westgate Market development. Again, we are not the project lead on that. We do not own that site. We're working with a development partner, Northwest Housing Alternatives, who has ownership of that site. We do have a lease agreement on it for storing some things in the building, but their Northwest Housing Alternatives is working on application to the state or tax credits to fund that project. So it's a competitive application process. That application will be going in the middle of the summertime here. And hopefully we can get awarded, and then we would begin the sort of process, the development process on that project, which would include a public process. A little update on that. I can't answer many questions on it because I'm not the project lead, but I am working closely. The other one I want to mention is you may recall that the Gloria Center, which as a reminder, the late Gloria Schultens donated that site to MCAC for building what wasn't the Gloria Center when it was donated, but we named it that in honor of Gloria Schultens. But we only used half of that 2.6 acre lot for the Gloria Center and the shelter site. And the back half of the lot is basically being staged for hopefully another affordable housing development down the road. So again, that's going to be there's more of a public process when it comes to housing development. So we would have to go through all that. We're not even in the design phase or anything along those lines. We anticipate that we would get there next year on that. So at best. So those are some updates. We obviously need affordable housing if we're going to further address unsheltered homelessness in the community, because we need places for folks to transition. We have been able to work with private market landlords really well to get folks placed, but there's just not enough inventory out there to house everybody who needs it and is ready to go. That's all.
Okay, any last questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, keep up the good work. Okay, number 6, item 6, audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 3 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. I've also added this. Our agenda also includes 4 other items, including 2 public hearings. Citizens wishing to comment or testify regarding any of those 4 items will be allowed to address the city council at that time. With that, is there anybody in the audience? Oh, I do have, we have Chuck Gomez. Would you like to address the city council up to 3 minutes about grants?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chuck Gomez of the Granada Theater, and I'm here to propose for future consideration a grant to be made available to the downtown businesses and business owners for the eventual and future beautification of our downtown. In consideration of the work we put into the Granada as far as greenery, flowers, and plantings on the sidewalks, I feel if we had the availability of a $1,000 grant made available to people and businesses in the downtown, they could continue to beautify this town. And the financial advantage of that is the individuals, would absorb the financial burden of the design, the acquisition, the installation, and maintenance of that beautification. If you took all that labor off, just use that $1,000 for the basic materials, pots, soil, greenery, plants, and a little part of that for increased water bills, I think the downtown would explode with color and beauty as the simple installation of the LED lights on the street lights were such an improvement to the downtown. Presently, we have the florist and the frame shop and Willow Bark and the Granada have plants in front of their buildings, and those just look wonderful. This would be such a year-round endeavor. Mums in the fall, green evergreens in the winter, and of course, early pansies in the spring, and then the array of flowers that we see now in the summer and fall. I think it would be a very wise, economical, and poignant beautification of our downtown for really not much money involved. The $1,000 grant made available to businesses and business owners of the downtown for future beautification. Thank you.
Anybody got any questions or
Thank you.
comments?
Is that 1,000 per applicant or 1,000 for the total program?
1,000 per applicant.
Okay. How many
Presently,
app-
Deborah and I spend about $600 on our plants per year, but that's not including the initial investment in pottery and soil and gravel in the bottom of those. I don't know if you consider that expensive or not. I guess it's goes back to what Einstein says, and everything is relative. But I think $1,000 per building, per business, for those that wish to partake in that endeavor would go a long, long way in the beautification of the Dalles.
Is there a cap on that though? You know, like a maximum of 10 businesses or?
I think that would be determined by the available cash, the funds that the city would be willing to put into that.
Okay,
I think it's a very interesting idea. I really do. I love the flowers out in front of the Granada. I think it really livens that up. I think it's a
Does.
great little idea. I'd like to see if maybe we could talk about that at an appropriate time.
We have people that come from all over the country for a lot of our events, and almost without an exception, people comment about the flowers in front of the Granada and what a nice touch it is to the downtown. And why should it just be the Granada? It could be so many businesses downtown. And, you know, there's a lot of greenery that could be purchased that doesn't need constant watering, care, daily care, or anything. We could really have a nice green thumb into the downtown for not much expenditure.
anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Appreciate you
Thank you.
coming here.
Thank you.
Louise Langheinrich?
Got it? Okay, excellent.
This one,
Nope.
that one. Yeah,
So-
I've got it in.
I'm Louise Lung Heinrich, owner of Lines of Designs here, 107 East Second Street. I'm here tonight to just give you a little update about the tour boat season that's happening this year. The cruise industry is doing very well globally and in the United States. You'll see in your handout that first paragraph has a reference to some economic reports of the industry. My reason for researching this information was to see if the industry had rebounded from the pandemic. And in fact, it has not only rebounded, but grown. And passenger spending has grown, which if you choose to read that report, you'll see it in there. Last year's tour boat season was abysmal with respect to the number of American cruise line guests that visited our museums and downtown businesses. They were essentially absent, even though the boats were present at our dock. Museums sustained losses along with our downtown merchants. I in particular was one of them. This tour season to date, we've had at least 20 boats use our dock since April, with additional ACL, American Cruise Line boats, using our dock as a refueling stop. The guests are visiting the museums, even Maryhill. So I'm so glad the numbers are up this year for them because it was just terrible last year. But we downtown merchants are not seeing the people walking downtown like we did before. And they're definitely not coming into our shops. And I would urge you to go talk to some of the downtown businesses and ask them yourselves on this information. I believe this is due to a part of a lack of not having coordinated marketing effort to the cruise lines. The other part also is the bus and excursion schedule that is set up by ACL. A week and a half ago, so that was the last week of May, I walked down to the tour boat to talk to the hotel manager. He was not having a good day. He shared why he was not having a good day. It's because he was frustrated in trying to find marketing information for our community to put on. They have a table in the lobby of the boat that the guests can go see the night before, and they have it to look at what's going on in our community. So he told me that he finally had to walk to the chamber to obtain something. Now, this is the end of May. They've had 2 months being here. So I've contacted the American Cruise Lines corporate office myself to receive permission to develop,
30 seconds, just sorry to interrupt.
so that I would have permission to have a marketing sheet on our downtown businesses, put on all 5 boats, and we have that development in progress. So where's the marketing and customer service liaison between the tour boats and our downtown? It's been a failure. From 2017 to the pandemic, we've had a highly successful position called the tour boat coordinator that existed with tens of thousands of dollars coming into our community, facilitated by that person.
Louise, your time, can you just wrap it up, please, real quick?
Okay, so to salvage this tour season, I suggest that a part-time tour boat coordinator is put into the Economic Development Office. The position description is in the 2017 contract. Communication is key in creating a win-win situation. We downtown merchants need some wins after last year. So besides helping a private corporation making money on our public resource, how about helping our downtown businesses? And I can take questions now. I encourage you to come visit my shop. We can talk about economics, whatever you would like.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
Did you survey the businesses down, or you've
Yes.
encouraged us to do it, but
No, I did.
If we-
So that's what made me
Yeah.
realize that it wasn't just me, I talked to my business neighbors, several of them, all the way down to Red Wagon Antiques. I asked them, because last year it was abysmal. We didn't see. In fact, I even asked the post delivery guy and the UPS guy, how'd you see the tour boat people last year? And they go, we didn't see them at all last year, because they're very noticeable. So this year, I asked several of those business owners, I said, are you seeing people coming? Are you seeing them walking, and are you seeing them coming into your shop? The answer is no. So I even checked, because it's wonderful. We're getting from Amy, we get the emails, the updates on the boats, on what's coming in, the number of people that choose to be on it's called the Dalles Loop. The problem is, and I even went to check one of them because I was so confused how the bus schedule was. So I went to Discovery Center to talk to the bus drivers when they got there. That's why I went down to the boat. They had 78 people off of the 2 buses. I talked to the bus driver. I said, oh, so do you do a hop on, hop off? And they said, no, we drop the people off here at Discovery Center. They sit there in the parking lot. The buses sit there. Then when the passengers are done with the museum, they get picked up and taken to the boat. Then they have lunch. And then they go to their afternoon excursions. So that's on those days. Then on days like today, part of the boat is shipped down to whoever signs up, down to Bonneville, Multnomah Falls. Then the rest stay here, and either they go on what's called the Dalles Loop, which is all the different museums. That's the traditional hop on, hop off. So I just wish we would market ourselves, our community, to these guys like we used to. Because when we had it, it was tens of thousands of dollars coming in. That's simple economic development.
okay. So you're suggesting that the city hire somebody in our economic development office to help with this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, unless Dan's got room on his schedule to do it himself.
Okay. Okay, anybody else got any questions or comments for Louise?
Thank you for doing the homework and bringing it to our attention.
You're welcome. Anytime. And I'm right down there at the shop. You can come in and we can chat about it some more. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be down.
Debbie Ferrer wants to talk about the beautification and tree committee.
Okay, I'm here today just to give you a very brief update on what the Beautification and Tree Committee has been working on. And I would just like to give a shout out to Mr. Gomez. I think we would really like to talk to you about that because we've been talking about something very similar in the committee. So I'll get you. But this year, one of the main focuses, we had one of our kind of big investments in time and money was to have a residential tree grant program. And so we found willing applicants for about 28 good-sized shade trees to go in around the community. And those were placed, the part of the grant criteria was that they be placed either in the parking strips where, you know, neighbors walking by, children going to school could enjoy the shade of these trees in a few more years after a little bit of growth, or in their front yards so that they would be enjoyed by, again, by the community. And we put those in last fall and they are all doing super well. So I'm really excited. I love walking around town and seeing some of our trees beautifying the communities and hopefully in not too long providing some really needed shade as we prepare for warmer summers. We plan to continue that grant program again this coming year, hopefully with some supplemental funds from a grant program called the Green Infrastructure Act, which unfortunately keeps getting pushed back farther and farther and farther, but we're looking at some other options. We've also worked with the community college to put in another sculpture, similar, not similar in design, but similar in project scope to the one that we put in at the Kelly Avenue triangle. This one will go at the Trevitt Triangle, and we're looking forward to seeing it sometime in July, either late June or early July to see that go in. Of course, we've been working on the community cleanup along with Columbia Gorge Toyota and Honda. And that continues on the second Saturday of every month. And then most recently, we worked with the Art Center on a project that they were working on for an art, don't know what to call it. Their art program was on gardens. And so we worked with them to create we called it the Notable Trees Walking Tour. And it's, I believe Amy has some for you. And I would really invite you to take this tour. We just enjoyed creating it so much. It's so shocking and amazing how many different kinds of beautiful trees there are within a short distance of our downtown. And maybe this would be something that the cruise ship passengers might also enjoy. So I encourage you to try that out. And that's about it. That's all.
Thanks,
We've
Debbie.
been
We
working on.
appreciate the job that you and the rest of the committee. I'd like to remind everyone, these are volunteers that are working very hard to make our city beautiful. Yeah. Anybody have any questions for Debbie? Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to address the city council for up to 3 minutes on something that's not on the agenda? Yes, ma'am. Please give us your name and.
My name is Erin Willis. Everybody, thank you so much for everything you do and for the opportunity. I'm fairly new to the Dalles, and these days I have a particular interest in the Google data center and the site and everything that's happening there. I wasn't able to attend the joint meeting that was last week, but essentially my question is like, what opportunities are there for the public, someone like me, to learn credible information about what's happening and also engage in the process? Yeah, what's coming up?
We do have another meeting scheduled, and this one will allow public testimony, unlike the first one.
Mhm.
Do you know the date offhand?
I believe it's July 23rd. Let me double check though. Yes, yep, July 23rd. I had it right. Look at that. 5:30.
Okay.
July 23rd, 5:30 at the county building, the new one they bought in downtown. The entrance is on Federal Street,
Mhm.
so we'll see you there.
Okay. And I mean, how about a little update from the last meeting for those of us that weren't able to make it?
Well, I think the update would be summarized by saying that the city council and the county commission heard different ideas on a process. There was no projects
Mhm.
that were discussed. There were no individual programs or people citing their preferences on where they thought the money should go.
Mhm.
But there was a lot of discussion about the different alternatives for, a revenue bond, for example, or pay as you go, or an endowment was one that was discussed a lot. And I'm sure that on July 23rd, we're going to be updated on all those alternatives. And I believe the staff is going to come back, or the committee, the original committee is going to come back with some ideas about how they might work, a little more specific information.
Mhm. Right. So that's like the investment portion of it. Another kind of question I have is, about the data center, environmental impacts, and I was here for the last city council meeting with the carbon capture project, that discussion, and that just this whole the tech industry here. I don't know. I just want to learn more about particularly my interest is in the environmental impacts. And so is there, where's a good place for, like a good place for a credible source for me to go to? Or is there some committee or a group of people that is looking into that I can learn from?
Our Director of Public Works, maybe.
One thing I was going to suggest, ma'am, is I'd be happy to speak with you about these various different topics and point you in the best direction. If it has to do with the actual tax abatement program and the revenues that might be generated from it, or if it's on, the status of construction of the different data centers and, how they use the different resources available in our community, there'd be different people who would be best able to answer some of those, and I can take a shot at directing you if that works for you. And so
Okay.
I'm happy to exchange contact information and connect that way.
Okay. I bet I can find your contact information on the internet. Yeah.
You can. My office is right over here too, and
Yeah.
maybe on the way out, right at the front, we have a business card that you can grab.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your interest. Anybody else? Okay, that concludes the audience participation part of the agenda. Item 7 is the city manager's report. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A good segue. I attended the SIP Strategic Investment Program work session last week. And one of the other things I wanted to mention before I forgot is that in coordination with Wasco County, we've developed a community survey. Thank you for your input, Councilor McLaughlin. And that survey has been posted on the Wasco County Facebook page and city Facebook page, and soon to be the city's website. Soliciting input and feedback on the community on these revenues and how you think they may best serve and position our community for success going forward. So that is one of the actions that came out of the work session last week. We'll be collecting that information, working with the staff team that the mayor mentioned a moment ago ahead of that next work session at the end of July. So I encourage everybody to take some time to go find that survey on our Facebook page and fill it out. It'd be a great opportunity. Also want to let the council know that we had a successful East 12th Street neighborhood outreach meeting on May 29th. This was to engage the community about the 12th Street sidewalk improvement project headed up towards where the former proposed Grove development originally sat. This had a pretty good showing, and it was really intended to inform the neighborhood of the project, hear any questions or concerns that they have, and help dial that project in. I also attended the Gloria Center ribbon cutting, and I've also been serving on the planning committee for the Oregon City County Managers Association upcoming conference, which is June 24th to 27th in Hood River. So it's right here in our backyard. And on the afternoon of Wednesday, June 26th, our economic development officer and myself and volunteers from the Wall Dogs will be participating and organizing a tour of our downtown, the various different projects that we have underway, as well as our famous murals. And just the last brief item is I had my monthly appearance on KODL last Friday, and that went really well. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8 is city council reports. We'll start on my left with Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not much to report except to just comment that if anyone wants to sort of look into the investment portion of our SIP discussion, there's a staff report that they can find on the Wasco County Commissioner's recent agenda packet. I think it starts on page 225, or you could email one of your city councilors. We could probably dig it up and send it to you. That's it.
Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 5th, I also attended the joint work session with the Wasco County Commissioners and City Council. On June 6th, I attended the Q-Life Board of Commissioners meeting where we approved an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement with the Mid-Columbia Economic Development District for broadband support, technical assistance, and grant writing. We also adopted the fiscal year 2024-25 budget and heard results of a financial audit and went into executive session. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor McLaughlin.
Work session I attended last week, and I have an airport commission meeting coming up. And that's about it for this report.
Councilor Long.
Yes, last Tuesday, the 4th, I attended, I guess, a walkabout with the Planning Department Director, Joshua Chandler, and Richard Wolf on our talk about the First and Union project down for urban renewal. And then on the 5th, I attended the City Council work session with the rest of the council. And on the 6th, I attended the swearing-in ceremony for our most recent police officer. And on Friday, the 7th, I met with Claire at La Petite. We discussed some of the urban renewal projects and just, she had a lot of questions, just a citizen who had a lot of questions about urban renewal and different people and projects that we have. And so it was nice to sit down with her and update her on that. And I also had an urban renewal agenda review meeting and a lunch meeting with another person interested in urban renewal issues. And that's and I just want to thank everyone for the understanding. I was a few minutes late. I'm helping a family member out of town and I had to get back to the hotel after assisting them with a medical appointment. So thank you.
Thank you. As far as my report goes, some of these have been mentioned. I won't repeat them, but I also did an interview on KODL on May 29th. But attended, as I mentioned, the Gloria Center ribbon cutting, the city county meeting on June the 5th, the police officer swearing in on the 6th, and on 7th, I gave a welcoming address to the Oregon Rural Letter Carriers Association at the Columbia River Inn, which used to be known as the Shiloh, which is undergoing some major renovations. And I would encourage everybody to go down there and check them out. It's really, they've really done a nice job in upgrading their hotel. Okay, item 9 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we have 2 items on the consent agenda. One is approval of the May 28th City Council meeting minutes, and secondly is approval of salary increases for the city's 3 contractual employees. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Councilor Richardson and seconded by Councilor Randall to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Okay. Item 10A. We have a public hearing. This is a public hearing to receive testimony on the proposed use of state shared revenue distributions to the city of the Dalles for the 2024-25 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law and certain rules apply. First, a staff report by Ms. Angie Wilson, our finance director, will be presented. Next, I will ask the council if it has any questions for the staff. After those questions, Or if there are none, I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any way directly related to the proposed uses of the city's state shared revenue distributions. Anyone offering in-person testimony must wait to be recognized, then approach the microphone, provide your name and address, and then testify. Anyone offering virtual testimony must raise their hand on Zoom, wait to be recognized, provide their name and address, then testify. After all interested persons are afforded the opportunity to testify, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Finally, the council will then deliberate if needed and will accept motions. These are the rules. Are there any questions? I just want to point out that we do have another public hearing coming up on the budget, the general budget, and this only deals with the proposed use of the state shared revenue distributions. So with that, I will turn it over to our finance director to give a staff report.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. You have my agenda staff report in front of you. This is the public hearing for the proposed uses of the state revenue sharing funds. ORS 221.770 requires the city to pass a resolution each year stating that they elect to receive the state revenue sharing money during the next fiscal year. The law mandates public hearings to be held by each the city and a certification that these hearings are required. City Council on the uses of the funds proposed by the Budget Committee or anyone else. This evening, the Budget Committee held a public hearing on May the 13th to consider possible uses of the funds and then voted to recommend to the City Council they continue to use the funds to support the general fund and the street fund. This evening, staff recommends that we move to adopt the resolution 24-013, declaring the city's election to receive state revenues for fiscal year 24-25. Does anyone have any questions or?
Does council have any questions for the staff? Okay. At this point, does anyone wish to testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the proposed uses of state shared revenue distributions? Anybody? Okay, let the record show that no one is interested in testifying on this issue. Okay. The public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Does the council feel it has enough information to make a decision? If so, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 24-013, declaring the city's election to receive state revenues for fiscal year 2024-2025.
McLaughlin will second.
It has been moved by Councilor Randall and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the proposed use of state shared revenue distributions. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 10B. This is a time scheduled for a public hearing for the City Council to receive public testimony concerning the adoption of the approved budget for the City of the Dalles 2024-2025 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law and certain rules apply. First, a staff report will be presented. Next, I will ask the council if it has any questions for the staff. After those questions, or if I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the approved budget's adoption. Anyone offering in-person testimony must wait to be recognized, then approach the microphone, provide the name and address, and then testify. Anyone offering virtual testimony must raise their hand on Zoom, wait to be recognized, provide their name and address, and then testify. After all interested persons are afforded an opportunity to testify, I will close the public hearing portion of the hearing. Finally, the council will then deliberate and I will accept motions. These are the rules. Are there any questions? Okay, the public hearing on the approved budget for the 2024-25 fiscal year is now open. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, the City Budget Committee reviewed the proposed budget on May the 13th and the 14th. They approved the budget with only one change on May the 14th. Oregon budget law allows a governing body prior to the final adoption to make changes to the approved by the Budget Committee in up to 5,000 or 10% of the operating portion of that fund, whichever is greater. If the changes are greater than the limit allows, another public hearing must be held with the required published notices prior to adoption. This evening, staff has no recommendations for changes to the budget approved by the City of the Dalles Budget Committee. If staff should identify any more changes, we would have brought it to the meeting this evening, which we do not.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Does the city council have any questions for the staff? I'd like to point out this is a culmination of hours of work that went into this, as well as 2 or 3 meetings of the Budget Committee that was held about 3 weeks ago. So no questions? Okay, does anyone wish to testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the approved budget? Anyone in the audience like to address the city council about the budget? Last call. Okay. The public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Does the city council feel it has enough information to make a decision? If so, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, would move that we adopt the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget for the city of the Dalles, making appropriations, authorizing expenditures, levying taxes, and authorizing the city manager to take such action as necessary to carry out the adopted budget as presented.
McLaughlin will second.
It's been moved by Councilor Richardson and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the adoption of the budget for the city of the Dalles for 2024 and 25. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson. Item 11A is our insurance renewal. We have Mr. Daniel Hunter with us. Would you like to introduce your sidekick?
All right.
So with me this evening, Councilman right here, Columbia River Insurance. They're pumps in the river. They are our agents of record.
Died on us. Let's try that. That better? All right. So this staff or agenda staff report is regarding city's insurance with City County Insurance Services, which will be general liability, auto, and property, in addition to our workers' comp premium or renewal with State Corporation. And in addition to my staff report, there's also a letter from Scott, or that Scott wrote on behalf of the Columbia River Insurance Company. And looking at the premiums for this year, the increases are quite honestly lower than I had anticipated. Following our meeting at CIS earlier this year, we were presented with potential premium increases at that annual meeting that were frankly a bit scary, particularly on the property side. And looking at the proposed premium increases that we received this year, the official for the city of the Dalles, it looks much better than what the general across the state premium increases were looking like. And I guess other than going through my staff report line by line, which I typically don't like to do, I can
hand it over to Scott if you have any questions for him, or if you'd like any clarification from me on staff report or the proposal for the insurance.
Since this is Scott's first year with us, first meeting, would you like to introduce yourself a little more and talk about your background and
Absolutely. Scott Rainier, Columbia River Insurance, Hood River, Oregon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening with you folks. And thank you also for the opportunity to work with the city of the Dalles on the insurance program. We responded to the recent RFP and were awarded this opportunity. Several months ago, we began working with Daniel in earnest towards the 7/1 renewal date, which is just a few weeks away at this point. I don't want to bore anybody or get too deeply into the weeds on the insurance part of city county insurance or SAFE, but just kind of a brief oversight I thought might be helpful. City county insurance services is the pool that operates in the state of Oregon. They provide property and liability coverages to the majority of the cities and counties throughout the state. At this time, they have no competitor. When you hear that initially, it could be a little alarming, but the reality is that they don't have a competitor because of the job that they do. Every year, there are people looking to sort of enter into the state of Oregon into municipal insurance. And over the last 15 to 20 years, no one has been able to compete with the coverage and the pricing that is provided by CIS. The other side of the insurance program, which is SAFE Corporation, the workers' compensation coverage, almost an identical scenario. SAFE has worked its way into a situation where they are delivering a employment safety program that is almost become the model throughout most of the Western United States. While every other state west of Colorado has seen increased work comp rates over the last decade, SAFE's rates, particularly in municipal insurance, have declined. So the two carriers that represent the programs for the city of the Dalles do a fantastic job. There's no ability for me to take credit for the fact that the renewal terms this year are as moderate as they are, because we have just started to work with the city of the Dalles. The reason that the renewal terms are better than what were forecasted at the convention has largely to do, I believe, now kind of as we've begun to dig into this a little bit, is the way the city of the Dalles is functioning and dealing with both CIS and with SAFE Corporation. The working relationship with both of those entities is at an extremely high level. And I say that from the standpoint, I've been working in municipal insurance for over 30 years now. And we have a wide variety of clients, and you get to understand your clients by the way CIS sees them, by the way SAFE sees them in the underwriting conversations. And it has been a very positive several months in communicating about the city of the Dalles. So like I said, I can't take credit for that, but everybody administratively and city council should take credit for it.
thank you. Any questions for Daniel or Scott?
I have one for Daniel, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Counselor.
It's tangential, but since we're on the topic of insurance, cyber insurance is not covered under this. It's purchased from a different entity, and that's, as you note in your staff report, that renewal comes up in the autumn. What does that cover? What does cyber insurance cover?
So that is going to cover us from material or financial losses due to cyber attack. So either somebody nefarious attacks us, gets into our financials, holds us hostage for ransom, or they get into our systems and create havoc that ends up costing us damage to city systems.
I was trying to avoid that.
That's what, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what it's going to cover.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Dan.
Piece that will address, and it's become sadly an event in the state of Oregon, but there is a nefarious process in which almost fake invoices are created, and finance departments end up cutting checks and going different places, and the cyber liability will protect that as well.
Thank you.
And we do run into that, not quite at that level, but things that are similar, like they call it social engineering, where we'll get an email from someone purported to be the public works director. And if someone's not paying attention, they could end up following that person's instruction. Most of the time, staff and IT are on the ball, and you can tell just by the email address, there's lack of signature. There's clues in the email itself that tells you that's not actually the person that it's purporting to be. And so one, having staff and systems in place to catch those sorts of things prevents us, but should something actually happen, that's where the insurance would help us out.
Understood. Thanks.
You said that you were anticipating a much bigger increase with property. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct. Yeah, I believe when we were at the CIS conference, they were projecting I thought it was a 13% increase in property premiums, which is in line with what we've experienced over the last 10 years, which is concerning because year over year, double-digit increases in property premiums at some point becomes untenable. We don't have that kind of revenue increase, so the money's got to come from
Well,
somewhere.
it came in at 3.4.
Right.
Right. So great. But auto damage is 14% up.
Right. And like I said, in the staff report, some of that is due to newer vehicles being replaced, and then additional vehicles being purchased in addition to some poor weather driving decisions that we had last winter.
Insurance. We're now up over $700,000 in insurance premiums. So, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate the presentation. Looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to direct the city manager to renew the city's insurance through CIS for fiscal year 2024, 2025 for an amount not to exceed $583,328.45, not including agent's fee and renewal of workers' compensation through SAFE for an amount not to exceed $118,496.25.
Is there a second?
McLaughlin will second.
It's been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Council McLaughlin to renew the city's insurance for fiscal year 2024-25. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this is an item that we just added to the agenda tonight. It's a resolution declaring a state of emergency and restricting fireworks. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 5th, at their county commission meeting last week, Wasco County adopted Order 24-031, which declared a ban on residential burning in Wasco County, in addition to Resolution number 24-012, which declared a local state of emergency as a result of adverse climate conditions and declaring a ban on the use of fireworks. This is a ban that applies to the unincorporated areas of the county, so it doesn't apply within the city limits. Previously, the city council had requested a discussion around this topic, potentially banning fireworks, and that was brought to the council earlier this year for consideration. This was in line with when Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue began to issue commercial fireworks sale permits. We had a lengthy discussion during that meeting, and there's a broad spectrum of different opinions on the matter, and no action was taken at that time. With the declaration of this burn ban and with potential and anticipated severe weather approaching, we're bringing this back for your consideration. Included in your packet is Special Ordinance number 24-601, temporarily banning the use of fireworks as a result of extreme weather conditions and declaring an emergency. This ban would remain into effect until September 30th, 2024. Commercial fireworks displays approved by a local government and or the Oregon State Fire Marshal are exempt. And so the July 4th festivities would continue to go forward. And this is very similar to action that we've taken in previous years. Due to the timing, just starting into the month of June, we're looking for your direction and action on this particular item for this year. And again, if you'd like to have continued discussions, we could bring that again, pending further guidance provided by you all this evening. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Cleaves?
I have one for our city attorney, I believe, actually. Good evening. This would make, the special ordinance would make fireworks use Class A civil infraction, so less than misdemeanor. That means persons ticketed would go to municipal court. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it says fine, punishable by fine up to $750. How does a fine in this case for civil infractions get determined? Between the 0 and the 750, how does that dial get turned?
Very, very typically, it depends on a case by case, individualized basis. If someone is issued a citation for this type of violation, they'll be issued a summons, on the uniform citation sheet that you get if you get a speeding ticket, for example. It'll command you to appear in municipal court or to pay the presumptive fine. If you want to contest the charge, you'll appear in municipal court. And at which point the officer who would have written that citation would also be in municipal court on the docket. And when the municipal judge, who would be sitting right where the mayor is sitting now, would go through the docket, and they'd ask you to come up and sit in that chair and explain what happened. And the municipal judge would weigh the totality of the circumstances and use their judicial discretion to set the fine.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, that satisfies me.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to adopt this? Oh, before we do that, is anyone in the audience who'd like to come before the council and give us a comment on this? Anybody? Okay. Oh, here we go.
Carolyn Wood, 1709 Liberty Way. I just want to say I think it's a good idea and we shouldn't even consider not doing it.
Thank you for being brief. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
I can find the verbiage. I will do that, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor, unfortunately, we added this item rather late, and so there may not be specific motion
There's
language.
no verbiage.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll give it a crack here. Mr. Mayor, I would move that we pass special ordinance number 24-601, a special ordinance temporarily banning the use of fireworks as a result of extreme weather conditions and declaring an emergency.
By title only is something that I would add.
By title only.
All right.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great.
I'll second it.
Okay, would anybody like to have the ordinance read in its entirety?
No.
City Clerk, would you?
Well, thank you.
Okay. Please proceed.
Special ordinance number 24-601, a special ordinance temporarily banning the use of fireworks as a result of extreme weather conditions and declaring it an emergency.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Item 12, a discussion about transient room tax. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we have one of several likely discussions around transient room tax or transient lodging tax, TLT or TRT. Throughout the course of this evening, I will use TRT. And this discussion will focus on tourism in our community in general. This discussion is prompted for a number of different reasons. One, this is one of the items that was discussed during our city council goal setting session last November. Our TRT ordinance, despite being updated a couple times over the course of history, can still benefit from some additional review and update. A contract that the city has with the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce is set to expire next year and requires a procurement process to go through. Our short-term rental license process is under review under the one-year moratorium that the council adopted late last year. And finally, this will help provide a backdrop for some of these conversations around economic and community impact of tourism and how we levy and collect TRT, and finally, how TRT is used. And so as I tried to detail in the opening of my staff report, what the intention here is, and part of tonight's effort is to see if there's any feedback or question from the council on process, is to have 3 council discussions focused around tonight being tourism itself at a very high vision level, followed by an additional council session around the TRT ordinance itself, how we levy and collect and manage those TRT revenues, followed by at least a third session around tourism, the procurement of tourism services, what those services might be, what's the goal, the scope of work, and the metrics and criteria that might be used in such a procurement process. Part of the approach here, and as the council knows, we have a large number of work sessions over the course of this year. We had a strategic investment program work session last week. We have a water master plan effort underway, in addition to a housing production strategies effort as well. And so by kind of breaking it up into these 3 focus areas, I'm trying to manage this as we kind of go through. Happy to answer questions on whatever the city council is interested in, but trying to keep us kind of focused in these different buckets for the different evening that we have. This process will also allow the community to participate, provide feedback, either written public comment when not on the agenda or other means. And in preparation for this evening, we did send a letter to every entity, if you will, that pays TRT tax, so that they are aware that these discussions are ongoing. One idea that we had briefly discussed, even as recently as the SIP work session last week, is also potentially using a survey of some kind, if there's interest by the council, to solicit input from the community on various questions that may come before us. And again, wanted to focus tonight is broadly on that, the vision of tourism and TRT in our community. And so then referring to the staff report that I have included in your packet, TRT, transient room tax, or as the state most often refers to it as transient lodging tax, is a tax specifically added to the rental rate of our hotel, motel, RV park, or short-term rental for stays less than 30 days. It's paid by the person using or renting that room and collected by the establishment and provided to the city of the Dalles. The first TRT ordinance for the city of the Dalles was adopted in 1977, and the city currently has a 6% rate that has been in effect since 1984, with an additional 2% that was levied, referred, and passed on January 1st, took effect January 1st, 2003. This additional 2% was originally used to retire debt associated with the Union Street underpass, along with supporting Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec. After the debt associated with the underpass was retired, the entire 2% is allocated to the Parks and Rec district per the city ordinance that we have on the books. Most recently, the TRT ordinance we have was updated in 2020 by General Ordinance 20-1380, which incorporated several different changes and best practices from the League of Oregon Cities model ordinance. Some of those had to do with STRs. And the state of Oregon lodging tax is currently 1.5% in addition to any local tax that we have here. So at the end of the day, the total tax associated with a motel stay here in this community is 9.5. I've included in the staff report, I believe at the end here, a chart that details what some other cities and counties charge for their transient room tax or transient lodging tax. And just as a nearby comparable, Hood River is also currently charging an 8% local TRT tax. Any questions on TRT or TLT? Or TRT, I'm just going to stick with that. And that very high level introduction as to what it is.
when you say high level. I don't know if my questions are low level or high level or medium level.
Feel free to ask and we can find out.
Okay. Well, I'll let the others do first. Is anybody got any questions before I start in?
Please do.
Okay, if you mentioned this before, I missed it, I apologize, but after the additional 2% was implemented in 2003, how much of that 2% went to retire the Union Street underpass debt and how much went to the Park District? We know how.
Yes, I had told her I was going to do this at the start and I simply went right by it. Angie, would you like to join us up here at the table?
I know you probably had to go back a ways to.
So I don't have the exact number on hand, but it was around 600,000
For
that
the Union Street underpass.
for the Union Street underpass, but 1.5% went to the Parks and Rec, and then 0.5% went to pay the debt off. And then once the debt was paid off, the 5% went to Parks and Rec.
2%, you mean?
The 2%, yes. And that the final payment was in 2014.
Okay, so the percentages actually are more useful to me to know that than the dollar amount. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So the Union Street underpass debt was retired in 2014.
That's correct. October the 28th.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, that's one of the areas where our ordinance specifically still has language around the Union Street underpass debt, and it's something that's been retired since 2014. That would be an example of one of the pieces we'd like to clean up with a review of the ordinance down the road.
Okay. So before that, that day, the date 2014, the Park District was receiving 1.5%.
Of the
And after
2%.
that, now they're getting the 2%.
That's correct.
Okay. Was it always, and this will be difficult, I think, unless you were here then, but I was wondering if the vision or the understanding in 2003 or thereafter was that the Park District would receive the entire 2% after the underpass debt was retired. Is there any way to know the answer to that question?
By what the ordinance stated, that was my perception.
Okay. Okay, and Matthew, in your three broad example vision statements, there's no mention of what we're going to do with the 2%, or did I miss something in the staff report?
Correct. That was going to be the second part of my brief presentation. I can be happy to answer that now if you'd like, or wait until I review that section.
Okay, any objection to him getting into that now? Anybody? The 2%?
Make it so.
So to help set the stage for some council discussion and feedback on tourism, again, at a high level in our community, I've included a couple different excerpts, if you will. The first is from the Explore the Dalles webpage, which is developed and managed by the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce under our existing contract. And I'll just read that briefly. Located in the rain shadow of majestic Mount Hood, the Dalles is a sunny destination offering abundance of outdoor recreation, cycling, fishing, hiking, rafting, camping, boating, rock climbing, and much more. Positioned as the eastern gateway of the world-renowned Columbia River Gorge, the city is surrounded by forests, orchards, and vineyards, miles of wheatland, high desert, and of course, the mighty Columbia River. The Dalles is known for its rich history, the annual Cherry Festival in April, and the local food, drink, and the music scene in downtown, which has exploded in recent years. But no matter what your interests are, we have something for you. In addition to that, I'd crafted three, again, broad example vision statements to try and help foster some discussion with the council this evening. It'll be very helpful for staff to see which of the below statements or pieces of the below statements best resonate or most resonate with the city council. So those three example vision statements are, and it really tries to cover a spectrum. The first is the Dalles is one of the destinations for tourists in the Pacific Northwest, supported by numerous hotels, numerous short-term rentals, and businesses and attractions that bring and rely on tourist dollars. The development of hotels and short-term rentals are strongly supported. A majority of TRT is used to grow TRT revenues in the tourism industry as fast and as much as possible. The second vision statement is tourism is a growing industry in the Dalles that supports existing businesses and potential new ones, such as restaurants, local shopping, and other attractions. Short-term rentals are allowed yet controlled. A substantial amount of TRT is used to moderately grow TRT revenues as well as support other city services. And then the third vision statement, and again, these are just examples that I came up with for better or for worse, is tourism plays an important supportive role for our local businesses and attractions. And there is a balance between hotels, short-term rentals, and other needs such as housing and industry. Short-term rentals are limited. A minimum of required TRT is used to maintain current TRT revenues. Now, what we mean by that, and this is a little additional detail, is that under state law, we are required to use a portion of our TRT revenue towards tourism promotion and advertising. And included in the handout this evening are some definitions that the state uses to kind of capture those different pieces. Typically that, or in years prior, since 2003, that percentage has been as high as 55% of our transient room tax dollars. And so there is a requirement that we continue to use that percent towards tourism promotion as defined in the handout that's provided to you. And so that's where we get into some of the descriptions in the vision statement about how we're using TRT and how it's used to grow tourism in our community. Now, there was one vision example not included in your staff report, basically describing, again, for that full spectrum, moving us away from tourism. However, being in the Columbia River Gorge and having a substantial tourism presence here already, that really didn't seem tenable to me and the existing businesses that already rely and contribute to that industry. And so, Mr. Mayor, to your question around 2%, I really didn't include any of the percentages in these vision statements and how we might use them. But knowing which one of these vision statements most resonates with you can provide some guidance to staff as to how we might propose using them in the future. And just to finish off my staff report, this is a discussion item, like I said this evening, kind of two questions here. The first is any feedback on the process with 3 different council meetings coming up, and then discussion around those vision statements themselves. The input from tonight's discussion will help affirm that and will help guide us in the future discussions we have later this year. As I mentioned at the beginning, the contract that we have with the chamber does expire at the end of June 30th, 2025. And so there is a little bit of a timeline here in order to allow staff to develop and execute a procurement process and have a contract awarded in some fashion and in place ideally before that contract expires and for the upcoming budget process next year. And with that, that's my staff report. And if there are any other questions, I will continue to do my best to answer them.
Other questions? I have a couple. If, could you give, some of this is kind of obvious, but I think it's important that it be further delineated or at least explained. And that is, could you give us an example of what our TRT money is being used for now, especially in light of these definitions, like what sort of things fall under this and how much money? And obviously the chamber is a big part of this.
Correct.
The definitions. And then is there other expenses that are associated with the TRT revenues that go somewhere else other than tourism?
So I would say that there are 2 buckets that we're really talking about here. There are the transient room tax dollars that we use that align with the definitions of tourism promotion, and that's primarily the contract we currently have with the Chamber of Commerce. And so that's, I believe, $490,000 a year, and that's required per state law since our ordinance was adopted in 2003 focused around advertising, publicizing, and distributing information to attract tourists. And a tourist is defined as a person who is traveling from more than 50 miles away to this community. And so a lot of those funds do go into advertising and marketing. Another area that's part of the chamber contract is the provision of a tourist facility, which also has specific definitions. The one related to the chamber is through the visitor center that they have down at the Chamber of Commerce office that serves that function. Those uses and those activities that fall under these definitions contribute to that 55% usage. We also use TRT revenues in a variety of other ways. I think the example we were talking about just earlier today was the Link bus. Those are funds under the city council budget that are used to support that public transit system that we have here in the Dalles. And while arguably a tourist may very well use that public transit system, it's far more focused on providing service to our constituents here. And so that would kind of fall in the other bucket, the 45%, I guess you could say. And so that's something that staff's been working through. It can get quite complex. And I'll also add, and I should have added this earlier, is also one of the reasons we're looking to amend the ordinance rather than replace it. There is a state law that any new TRT tax levied requires a 70%, 30% split. And so we would prefer to keep our funds as flexible as possible, to put it frankly, and want to stick with the 55% requirement that we currently have.
Just to clarify, when you were talking about the chamber, the state law delineates what you can use the money for. It doesn't say you have to give it to the chamber. It has to be used for certain tourism-related expenses as defined in these definitions.
Correct. It does not specifically call out a chamber. Chambers often play that role, and that's the contract we currently have.
Now, the part that does not go towards tourism, does not go toward the link, and there's no other real specific expenses associated with the TRT, it's fair to say that that money goes into the general fund, which is the fund that supports the bulk of the city's day-to-day operations, including our police department, our community development department, our finance department, et cetera. Is that a true statement?
That's accurate.
I believe that's accurate, yes.
Okay. And just to also remind everyone, we just passed our budget tonight, and the budget calls for $1,050,000 of transient rental tax to go into our general fund. And of that, the Park District gets $367,000. And the rest is, like I said, we talked about either stays in the general fund or is allocated towards tourism-related expenses. So I think that's important.
Correct. And I believe the total TRT revenues were approximately 1.35, and 350 of that approximately, and Angie's might correct me on the numbers here.
I thought I just got that.
The 367,000 is correct of what we've dedicated to Parks and Rec. This is, a budgeted number, so it's not, 100%. If those revenues were to come in higher, we would do a supplemental budget, bring more revenue in, and increase the expenditures for the Parks and Rec.
Right.
I was just clarifying the total amount we receive versus, okay.
Yeah, those are actually budgeted numbers. And of course, like Angie said, those are budgeted, and hopefully we'll reach our projections like with all the other revenues.
Yes.
Okay, and if you add those two numbers together, what the Park District gets and the tourism, it's $1,417,000 according to my calculations. So
that is correct.
Okay.
Amazing.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Point of clarification. So bucket one is chamber at 490,000, and the visitor is included with the chamber expenditures, or is that separate?
For the visitors, the visitor center provided by the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce is included in their contract.
Okay, so that's bucket one. Bucket two was the Link bus system.
And the Link is just one example of how we use funds. There's a multitude of different ways we've used those funds, and they do change year to year.
For example, the fireworks.
And then it seems like there's a bucket three, which is Parks and Rec. which is funded under those funds, correct?
That was we're doing 8%, was the ordinance. 6% was for tourism,
Right.
and that 2% was for operational expenses for Parks and Rec. So it's not it's tourism dollars, but it was going for operational expenses. And maybe Jonathan can word it better.
I would just say, just to riff off of Angie just for a second, it's completely in the second bucket. It doesn't come
Oh, I
from,
see. So
yeah,
there's just two buckets.
there's just two
And
buckets.
then beyond that, then that all the revenues in excess then goes into the general city fund.
Correct.
And so that's what pays for fireworks. What other things in that other bucket are included in that expenditures?
Well, so they're unrestricted funds. They're just general fund dollars.
Right.
So they can be spent, and it's really impossible to trace them, right? Once they get put into the general fund.
Got it. But we're bound by percentages
Right.
mandated by the state.
Right.
Just on the 55% for tourism service.
Oh, I see. So then we have a discretionary,
The remainder of the funds, we do have discretion on how to use them.
all right?
Yeah, at some point, since the reason I bring this all up is because it's important for the public to know where their TRT dollars are going. And at some point also, we're gonna have more meetings on this issue, more discussions.
Correct.
And at some point, I'd like to know from the Park District how they use the TRT revenues at the park. And I know Scott Baker's here tonight. Hi, Scott. And just FYI, it's something I'm gonna be looking for. So, we don't have to get into that tonight. We're gonna future meetings. Yeah.
And I think that works well for me, Mr. Mayor, because that's kind of how we've tried to structure this, where tonight is less about exactly how these funds are used or could be used, and more along the lines of the role that tourism plays in our community and the process under which we have this discussion. That'll provide some guidance to staff as to, what changes we might want to see in the ordinance, and how do we set the stage for the conversation around tourism services and the scope of work associated with that to accomplish, your objectives.
Scott, I'm going to open it up later and I'll give you an opportunity if you'd like to come and speak to the city council. So,
Mr. Mayor.
yes, Ms.
Hi.
Counselor Long.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention that Lisa Farquharson had a family emergency, and so she has sent Don Rasmussen to as sort of her liaison person. So when you get to that point and you're calling on Scott, would you please also include her in the discussion?
Sure will. Anybody else? I did have one other issue, and that is, I just want to say something about short-term rentals. I feel that people that run short-term rental, bed and breakfast, et cetera, do a pretty responsible job of doing what they do. I have had the opportunity to talk to a couple of the people that own those types of businesses, and I've been impressed with their willingness and their dedication toward, running a taut ship. Having said that, this is an issue that has come up in many other cities in Oregon, and I do believe that many cities like to have that TRT revenue off of these types of businesses because of the revenues that they bring in. I don't think our city's in a position where we would dramatically need those types of revenues in this city. And I would never want to take away any licenses that are currently out there. I'm a believer in grandfathering in those, but I would like to see some pretty tight restrictions on short-term rentals as we proceed in the coming months. And again, I'm not out to get anybody, especially the ones that are existing now. But I know that our community development department's working on this and is going to come back in, is it September?
That's the ballpark.
Yeah. And this is something that impacts our short-term, our TRT revenues. But I feel like the issues that have come before us there and the impact on our housing values and our our property prices that people are paying now for homes isn't worth the additional revenue that we receive. So that's my 2 cents.
Days.
Yes.
I've been working on this initially when we heard from citizens about their concern about Airbnbs. And when we first went down this road, I don't know if we had sufficient controls. We just didn't know what was coming. So as we heard concerns, what we did is we went into a mode of trying to find some solutions where everyone could live within the means. But I think the city has put enough controls so that we can exist. And also, if I'm not mistaken, we have a moratorium on any new, correct? We do. So the city has been responsible in responding to this, and we're looking at developing plans so that, Airbnb operators can exist within the Dalles, but also that we can have some assurances that they won't overtake the rental and the single homes in our community. So we're working to find a balance for all of that. I just want to say that.
And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not casting any dispersions on the existing people that run the bed and breakfasts of the community, et cetera. So.
Well, I have found them to be very amenable, and actually both sides of the argument and the issues have worked together. And so until this summer season comes upon us, we'll see what it brings.
Is there any other questions or comments from city council members before I offer the public an opportunity to address us? Councilor Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of brief comments. First of all, to the staff, the process does make sense to me. It's a conversation over time, which gives us opportunity to reflect and also gives the time for the public to reflect and offer input. So yes to that. And yes, also, I think that offering a community survey at the appropriate time would be helpful, just to give people a way to participate without necessarily having to come and sit through multiple meetings. Only so many of us are willing to sign up for that. With regard to the vision statements you wrote out, sort of drafted for us, I guess for myself, I'd lean toward number 3 or maybe 2.5, if I could split the difference. Tourism obviously is critical to many businesses in town. I think we all realize that. That said, we've also probably all seen communities around Northwest where tourism has become the main economic activity, and I think that's often unhealthy for the community. I think, in my opinion, it ought to be part of a diversified economy. So that's just my initial high-level 2 cents there. Finally, with regard to the chamber contract, this may be a little tangential, but I do think that Ms. Langheinrich made an important point to consider. And with regard to needing maybe an energetic or consistent cruise ship liaison, and having a conversation with the chamber and with ourselves with the TRT just seems like the right time to be thinking about how to implement a liaison role, whether it's in-house, whether it's part of the chamber contract or some other mechanism. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
More.
Okay, Mr. Baker, you want to come forward and please introduce yourself and.
Hello, Scott Baker, Executive Director for Northern Wasco County Parks and Recreation District. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Councilors. I hadn't planned to speak tonight. I'm happy to have the opportunity to do so, and I thank you for that. There's a couple points I wanted to address. I'm trying to think of the best order. One, I want to share that Parks and Rec districts getting transient room tax dollars throughout the state is not uncommon. However, and I don't know if this is written into your ordinance, they're seen as the part that is tourism.
whether that's the fishing tournament that we're having in a couple weekends, the softball tournaments, the car show that brings hundreds of people into the area. We're generally the portion that is given to parks and recreation districts is seen as the part of the pie in that tourism chunk bucket, if you will, rather than coming from the other bucket. And so I'll just share that. The other thing I wanted to share for those of you who were not aware of how what drove this 2% to the Parks and Rec District in the first place is that when the city owned and operated the parks, they didn't pay a water bill. And then when the park district was voted into existence, they paid the water bill, but there were no water meters. And water meters hit the scene, and Parks District was unable to operate. And so what the city council was given a choice was whether to create a system wherein the Parks District wouldn't be charged for water, but then they'd be unlike any other entity, or they knew that they had this opportunity to divert or increase their transient room taxes, give that to the park district, and then the park district gave it back to the city into their general fund by paying for water. And so that was the decision that the council landed on. And that's kind of how that came to be. Since that time, the transient room tax has grown to far exceed the water bill. This year, we're set to receive about $330,000 in transient room taxes. Our water bill is going to be probably about $167,000. So that has been incredibly crucial for the park district because that gap between what we give back to the city to pay for water and what we collect in transient room taxes allows the park district to function. Without that money, we would not be able to function. We would be closing parks, choosing which parks to water or not water, cutting staff. And it would be really detrimental, I think, to the city because we are just at a spot now where I think our parks look the best they ever have. And we're making great strides in our park district. And so it's absolutely crucial, those funds for the park district. Yes, the lion's share of it we give back to the city in the form of water payments. But that gap is really what allows the park district to function. And that's because unlike a lot of other local government agencies, the bulk of our income is property taxes. And with measures 50 and others that have capped that at 3% and inflation that has no cap, that's what allows us to function and bridges that gap for us when we don't have franchise fees, water fees, or any other gas taxes or any other sources of income really beyond property taxes. And boy, if we wanted to charge what it would cost us to run the pool, no one would be able to swim in it. And so, so I just wanted to share that history because I think it was important. We have, I think, a lot of opportunity here to do a lot of good, especially if you want to reconsider and think about putting us in that other bucket. Right now, the largest thing holding the park district back is lack of grant match. I wrote and then couldn't submit grant applications this year because we simply didn't have the capital to match the funds. Sometimes it's only needed a 20% match. I think this could be a really great use of that SIP funds as you go forward in those discussions to consider for our town. I know that in your vision 2020, parks was in the top 3, along with schools and housing, all great, important things. But another creative solution would be to earmark an additional 1% of transient room tax only for capital improvements. And that would see a dramatic and immediate increase in the quality of your park system. Because those additional funds, they're not going to get diverted to staff or anything else. I'm only going to use them for capital projects. I'd use them as grant match. You get, they'd be pennies on the dollar, and you'd see your parks looking the best they ever have.
Thank you. Hopefully the additional revenues that are coming in from the first Google facility that's online and the community service fee that we worked out about a year ago and the additional property taxes and the community service fee off the two new data centers will help as well. So Thank you.
Yeah, that first round of a tax abatement coming off really saved the park district. We were looking at a cliff and had those funds not come in at that time. I don't know, we would have had to lay off staff and that would have been a terrible situation.
Thank you. We'll be having more discussions about this, I'm sure. Thank you. Anybody else want to, oh, it's Don Rasmussen. Come on up. Would you two ladies please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Dawn Rasmussen. I'm a private citizen, and joining me is Lisa Rundell. She's with the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce as the Operations and Finance Manager. So thanks. I appreciate this opportunity, and I have a different hat on tonight. My background is I have been in tourism. I worked at Travel Portland for 6 years, and I also worked at a small convention and visitor bureau called Washington County Visitors Association. I think it's called Visit Tualatin Valley. That's a while ago. And I just want to share just a little bit about tourism and why it's important, because it is an economic driver. It is a destination entity. When we talk about developing destinations, what do we want to sell? How do we want to sell it? Who are we going to sell it to? And understanding different types of consumer trends that are going to impact how you shape your packaging and messaging. So I have seen it both at the Portland level and in a smaller convention and visitor bureau level, but I also have worked in the global environment. So I have seen how important it is that we have tourism, because it brings everybody together, and having a professional tourism bureau or chamber doing tourism types of things is so important. In fact, I moved here because someone here, Renee Walasavich, used to be at the Cousins Inn many years ago. She took the time to show me around the Dalles, and I was able to tell clients about the Dalles and help sell the Dalles as part of a greater Oregon picture. So we're all united together. And I don't know if you will have anything you want to add, but I think it's very important that when you consider what tourism is going to look like here, that you stick with the professional, so to speak. And so when you're looking at that contract, I mean, if you have to go to the doctor and you have pancreatic cancer, you're not going to go to the horse veteran, right? Veterinarian. And so you need to go with the people that know the skill sets that are necessary to perform the job, that are in that line with that. It's a specialization. So I hope when you're considering the chamber contract next year, there's some things you should be aware of, that there are already a lot of agreements in place. And if there's any interruption, that will end up costing more. Wanting to also find out a little bit more about what kinds of things that this chamber or the city council wants to know specifically, that that you really want to have as a priority, and those types of things. Lisa, do you want to add to that?
I'm just here in case you have any questions that I might be able to answer.
But I just believe, I love the Dalles so much I moved here. And that's because I think there's so much wonderful things to do here, and the quality of life is wonderful here. We have great things to see and participate in. So I really urge you to really be thoughtful about this process. It sounds like Mr. Cleaves was thinking about that with his mission statements, but I think we have to think about the bigger picture, how the chamber already is supporting local businesses, developing tourism, helping develop economic economic development. It's all part of the bigger picture that the chamber's already doing that. So thank you very much for your consideration. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Rasmussen?
No, but I have a comment. But this is related back to Parks and Rec. It's safe to say that I'm the longest serving counselor here. Even though I wasn't involved in the decision to include Parks and Rec in the transient room dispersion funds, I do remember the discussion and the topic of using those monies to reimburse for water usage at Cirrhosis Park. I think that was one of the correct, Scott. So I think, thank you for reminding us, because I had forgotten, but that was an important part of that equation. So I just wanted to make that comment to validate, and thank you for making those comments. And yes, I know how invaluable our chamber is in promoting tourism, and the good job that you've been doing. And I'll tell you, Cherry Festival in the last years, since I've been here for 50 years, and I've participated in many events, and I think I've been in every parade of the Cherry, and this year was just unbelievable, and the expansion. So continue the good work, and we'll find ways to disperse fairly and work together. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Victor?
Victor Johnson, 313 West Fourth.
Victor, could you check to make sure the mic's turned on?
I think it's on. Maybe I'll just
Now
get a
you
little
got it.
closer. Look at that.
Much
that-
better.
That sweet spot.
I taught you how to use a microphone. You know that.
I had a couple questions. First of all, do we know how much of a percentage of our economy is tourism? Generally, just like a ballpark, 15, 20%, something like that, maybe.
I don't know off the cuff, and I think it may vary by your definition.
Sure. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is it seems like a really good place to start is what do we want as far as tourism and how much of that economy do we want to have? The Dalles, we're pretty lucky. We have a pretty balanced economy from a lot of different sources. And as we're making a plan for what we want to do, and I'm just making this up, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but you know, when people are asked what they want to see from the Dalles, what we want the Dalles to be like, probably the number one thing you hear is we don't want to be Hood River. And I think that's kind of a lazy answer, and B, I don't think it could ever really happen. But tourism isn't inherently good, right? We want to have a solid plan on what we want to see, how much of it we want to see, and those kind of things. So it seems like that's in the visioning that people have done. There's probably some clues in there as far as how we want to be approaching this. And that seems like maybe the very first step before we start doling out money and pursuing paths and all that. So I would just suggest that. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Tourism has been talked about for 30 years. When we started, just one point I'm going to make is that when we started talking about building the Discovery Center, Brett Wilcox, who then owned Northwest Aluminum, which he knew and we all knew was going to be fading because of the cost of aluminum in China. He loaned money to the Citizens for the Discovery Center to get that whole project off the ground so that we could start, had a legitimate organization and some money to start. But his point was that we had two legs on a stool, and that we really needed to invest in the Discovery Center to bring the third leg to the stool. And of course, but we knew we were losing the aluminum industry. And of course, we have by now, I guess, basically said it's been replaced pretty much by some manufacturing, but by Google. So anyway, it was important in his mind, and he was certainly a person of the world, much more than any of the rest of us, that tourism was an obvious thing that we needed to develop, but we didn't want to be 100% dependent upon it. So I think we have done a heck of a lot of that. But I just wanted to point out that that was a vision a long time ago, not to become, the impact that losing the aluminum industry was tremendous, because we were looking like 1,200 family wage jobs that left this area because of the two aluminum plants that closed down. So we've been recovering from that ever since. And thank goodness tourism has grown, but it has not ever going to recover, it's a totally different way of improving our economy. Enough on that. The other thing that I wanted to say was about the room tax, the TRT tax. When the Oregon Trail Coordinating Council and put on the Oregon Trail event in Sesquicentennial in 1993, The hotel motel tax, I mean, I think we had the 6%, but we locally worked on adding 2% for that purpose. My memory is a little different than, but in base, actually, some of that tax was used, the expectation that it would cover expenses that we had already incurred because we had to do the event before we got the license plate money. So some of the, but in time, that was a local vote and it became the money that has now, I didn't realize this, but apparently the purpose of this went to the underpass and then to the parks. And I do remember that we've had some discussion, and I would agree with Scott about the discussion tax, some of that tax going for parks and recs. That was later, I mean, more like when we got up into 2000, that discussion came about. So it was, there a lot of changes in the early 90s because of the way our property taxes and our city taxes changed with whatever ballot measure it was. Anyway, so that's just my 2 bits of a little history.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay. We're gonna, like I said before, we're gonna be having other meetings on that. I would encourage those that are interested to attend those meetings. They'll be well advertised. I think the staff is looking for some direction from the city council as to which of the 3 visions. We've already heard from Councilor Richardson. We also have 2 members that are not here. So,
Mr. Mayor, the other thing I would add is, yes, it'd be very helpful to have any feedback on those draft or example vision statements as Councilor Richardson had provided. Or if there's anything missing from any of those that comes to your mind, that would be helpful too. And I can do some outreach to a counselor who's not here to solicit their input.
great.
Well, for me, I think most of what I've heard tonight kind of lends support to the statement number 3. I think the balance is what's needed. I mean, we obviously, tourism does play an important role, but as Victor pointed out, a little too much can erode the quality of life for the people who live here. So I think we need to find that balance. And as for the parks, I have on a short list here of destination points for tourists. Sources Park and the Viewpoint and the memorial up there is one of them. And I think that obviously enhances the tourist experience, but it also serves the community well. So I think that 2% that they receive is well spent.
Thank you.
Same direction.
Okay. Looks like we have 2 counselors interested mostly in number 2 and 1 at 2.5, 2.5, right?
Somewhere in the greater 3 to 2.5 neighborhood. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Scott, did you say, you said 3? Yeah, not 2. Okay.
I agree with 3, but we have time to change. Anything from Darcy?
Oh,
do you have any input?
Councilor Long, do you have anything, looking at these 3 vision statements, any feedback on?
No, I think I'm in general agreement with the council. I think we need a balance. I'm still concerned about short-term rentals, but I'm also concerned, as a financial advisor with the number of companies I see just buying up homes, telling people, we'll buy your home and you don't have to worry about putting it on the market because then, we're back into subprime mortgage or other kinds of packaging, and other kinds of issues that are going to affect our housing. I was kind of thinking about when people say they don't want to be Hood River and nobody ever really defines what that is. And tourism in Hood River looks more like water sports on the river and skiing and shopping downtown to me. And I think we have a totally different kind of tourism where we do have some shopping, but we have a lot of historical sites. And then we also have the sporting events that I think are more prominent here. And so maybe it makes sense for us to think about increasing that and the fishing too. I think that, Hood River has some, but I think that especially with the things that have happened over the last 5 years, that bass fishing tournaments and things coming here has really broadened the types of tourism, which really changes what time of year tourism is happening. It's not just during the summer anymore.
Okay, thank you. Do you feel like you have enough feedback from the city council to bring back more specificity at the next meeting?
I think so, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I think one of the intents here and the next step is for me and staff and I to sit down and really review the ordinance that we have for legal sufficiency and to propose any other alterations we may think are prudent to bring it up to date. This elements of what we've discussed this evening might be most helpful just off the cuff for the third session where we're talking about tourism services and what we might want to focus on, what the scope of work may be. But I think overall it has been helpful.
Good. Well, with that, anybody else, any closing remarks or questions from the city council before we adjourn?
No.
Okay.
Are we adjourning, Mr. Mayor, or going to executive session?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Said, are we adjourning or going to executive?
Going to executive session.
All right.
In fact, the city council of the city of the Dalles will now meet in executive session in accordance with ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No final decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we'll return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. We expect to return to open session in about 15 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. I wasn't given a separate link and it looks like I'm the only person on this link. Can I stay on this for the executive session or what am I supposed to do?
Mr. Mayor and Amy, we can just call you, Darcy. I put you on speaker if you'd like, if that's convenient.
Okay, sure, great.
Okay, terrific. I'll call your cell in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's up to the mayor.
Yeah, we're
A date? You looking for a party?
Okay, any other business come before the city?
No.
Can I finish?
No.
Okay, with that, we're adjourned.
All right, let's get the